All right. Thank you so much for being here, Omar. I really appreciate you. We're excited to learn about Sabeel and Christian pilgrimages um, to the West Bank. Karina connected us with you. Very grateful for Karina to connect. And I'm excited to learn from you. And a lot of our Christian friends are doing amazing activism out of their churches, out of their communities, and I would love to learn from you more about that and how you're connecting with communities worldwide. And over to you.
Yeah, again, I really want to thank you for having me and for all the work that you are doing and for your involvement in any work to promote justice, peace, is extremely appreciated. I know we're living at a period of time that it's sadly we're surrounded with world leaders who are idiots, who are tyrants, who are dangerous, and it's becoming very risky and scary for people actually to speak out or to be involved. So anybody who's willing to speak truth to power is very much appreciated. So I would like to. It's a good opportunity. It's a small group. So a small group would enable us to have a more personalized meeting where we can take the discussion or the conversation in any direction that the people want.
Hmm.
So this is exactly what Sabeel does. We're a grassroots organization, and most of the work that we do is working with the communities on the ground, working and helping people to organize, help people to ask questions, not to look for answers, but to ask questions. So I would like to touch a little bit on different topics so that I just give you some content, hopefully new content or a new angle to content that you're already aware of, so that maybe we could open it up for a conversation and discussion. I need to warn you that it's when I start speaking, I cannot stop. So that's something that is dangerous. I don't know if it's how much space you have to record. I could go for these. Um, so when people, so the biggest misconception around the world actually, and sadly sometimes in the Middle East, when people think about Christians or Christianity, they think it's a Western religion. And when they think about Islam or Judaism, they think it's an Eastern religion. And it shouldn't be a shocking news, but Christianity is similar to Islam, exactly like Islam and Judaism. We are an Eastern religion. Christianity is actually a religion that started and was that started. All of its story is in Palestine. So it's the only 100% Palestinian religion in one way or other, because Jesus, for most of his life, have lived in Palestine. Did a little bit, some short visits, maybe to Lebanon today. Of course, there wasn't the borders of Lebanon or the borders to Egypt, but most of his life and his ministry has been in Palestine. So it makes him a um, Palestinian citizen in one way or another. Now, it wasn't us who Palestinians who called this land Palestine, as you're aware. It's a name that was given to the land, and from one empire to another, from one generation to another, it became part of a reference to this area of land, which the borders differ or so on. But at least from 70 AD and even before 70 AD, people have been referring to this land as Palestinians. We've had over 40 empires or kingdoms who have ruled over our land or in this region. So Jerusalem is a very popular city that has been that to get occupied. And actually, the rate is 90%. If you attack Jerusalem, you will occupy it. So out of the 44 attacks that Jerusalem had, 40 attacks worked out. So it's not a really remarkable thing to occupy us. But it's remarkable that the Palestinian people always overcome and outlive empires. So today, if you want to go, you come, and if you come and say, Omar, this is interesting. Who are the 44 kingdoms that attacked Jerusalem or ruled over Jerusalem, the 40 kingdoms? I can mention them, but also if you want to go and visit what is left from them, you will have to take you to archaeological sites or diggings. And some of them stayed for such a short period that there's nothing left in the land of them. But if you wander around our cities, our villages, the living communities, the people who live in the land still call this land Palestine, um, uh, and one community who are very diverse. So being Palestinian, actually, Palestinian is not an ethnicity. In the old city, and it's less than 1 mile square, in the old city, we have 28 ethnicities who live in it who identify as Palestinian. The majority of us, including myself, we're Arabs, but there's many people. There's people who are Coptic. There's people who are Gypsy Palestinian community. There's an Indian Palestinian community. There's an Afro-Palestinian, a Nigerian Palestinian community. There's the Armenian Palestinian community. There's the Kurdish Palestinian community. So being Palestinian is a very, very diverse nation with I would say with dozens of ethnicities in it. But being Palestinian does not mean Muslim. It means religion-wise, we have like 6 established religions. So most people think that Palestinians are Muslims, and some people who know a little bit say, "Oh, there's also Palestinian Christians." That's interesting. But also there is, and for most of our history, there has been and continues to be a Palestinian Jewish community who identify as Jewish. The numbers are in the thousands. They're not many, but there are Jews who identify as Palestinians. There are the Samaritan Palestinian community that's similar to the Jewish community, but very different. There is also the Baha'is, there's the Ahmadiyya, there's the Druze communities, who somehow, they might identify as Muslim, some of them, but they're actually not. They are not recognized as part of the Muslim world. They are very different, or very different outsets of Islam, or what people would call them as a separate religion. There's people, many Palestinians who do not identify with any religion. We have some Buddhist Palestinians who converted to Buddhism or so on, but we're a very diverse community. The third part is that it's for what is happening in Palestine and Israel. It's important for people not to be overwhelmed with the information. There's a plan, and this plan is that it's to have more, which you're all aware, I trust, by just you know how much you're involved with Palestine. The plan is to have as much land with the least number of non-Jews. So that's the plan. So this is Zionism in one sentence. As much land as possible with the least number of Arabs. So most people, when they think about this sounds crazy. It sounds something from the Middle Ages or from a different world, something that we don't have in our recent memory, somebody who is advocating, or a nation or a group of people who are advocating for ethnically cleansing a land or taking over land and ethnically cleansing the indigenous people who live in it. However, when Israel says it, especially in countries that identify, including Canada or the US or many countries in Europe who identify as liberal democracies, this insane story or narrative will only make sense, it is only because of religion. Whether it is Christianity, Islam, or Judaism, when we talk about this colonial project, somehow we have stories and scripture and our holy books and our religious narrative that somehow justifies it. So it becomes a story, but our problem falls down with a certain interpretation, or maybe it's a wrong interpretation, or it's a misunderstanding, or you're looking at a certain text, or you're ignoring the context. So we need to understand that this insanity that we live in is only okay with the liberal democracies, where there's a lot of craziness happening around the world, is only because of religion. even in many of these countries, like Canada identifies very much as a country that is maybe like post-Christian or a very secular country, or a country that is not very much involved with religion. And the same thing with Europe, especially Western Europe. So you have this situation that only becomes normalized because of religion. And sadly, we have Zionism, a Zionist movement in Judaism, which we are very aware of. There is also a Zionist movement. It's a growing Zionist movement in Islam. I would have to say more within Sunni Islam than Shia Islam. Not many people have written about it. We are working on some research and documentation, and there's some people who have actually addressed it. But then you have Christian Zionism. Now, interestingly, the logic of Zionism in Judaism is not a new concept. There has been throughout history number of movements similar to Zionism that have taken place, but they've all failed. The only Zionism that happened is the recent Zionism that has become successful, and there was, as a result of it, a country or a nation that became established, the State of Israel. But Christian Zionism actually predates the form of the existing Zionism that exists today. Jewish Zionism or Jewish national Zionism, ethnic Zionism. And Christian Zionism, you encounter it in many different ways, but it's important for people to understand that the different forms that people encounter Christian Zionism are very different and distinct from one another. And it's important when you're speaking to somebody who is a Christian Zionist, and that'll help you to go into the main categories of what entails as a Christian Zionist, so that you understand whom you're speaking with. And actually, so if you do proper diagnosis, then you could really start to engage with that person or that individual or even with that community in a way that you can help them understand that they're harboring a very toxic ideology or a dangerous ideology. So, if we start, the most famous Christian Zionist that we know of, that the people know of, is Lord Balfour, who was a Christian Zionist, but he was also a strong anti-Semitic. Some reports say that he died very anti-Semitic, and some people said he became a little bit more tolerant towards his death. But Lord Balfour was a Christian Zionist. And you need to understand that at the beginnings of the 20th century, or even into the late 19th century or the second half of the 19th century, already movements of anti-Semitic movements started to come and establish to understand that the Jews are dangerous and they should no longer be in Europe. So that is the ideology of it. Of course, they had different forms how this ideology came. Most of its roots go back to Christianity and anti-Semitism within Christianity or anti-Jewish sentiment. But it started to become extremely strong at the end of the 19th century and the beginnings of the 20th century. So there were, I'm generalizing here because this is a very short period, and I told you I can't stop talking, and you need to go home or you have important work to do later on. So there was two schools how to deal with the Jewish problem. And remember, the Jewish problem, it wasn't like Jews were mainly in Europe were the only other in Europe. Now Europe is not the most tolerant place around the world, and they always and is today very racist and has been racist. But the main other that they have been facing was the Jews were the other, the people who were different from most Europeans. So one group said, let's kill them. That was Hitler, I'm generalizing here, so I apologize, but as to simplify it. So Hitler said, let's make gas chambers and let's kill the Jews. Lord Balfour and others said, we don't need to kill them. Let's get rid of them and send them outside Europe. So imagine now, if you go to the right in the US, that's a way of getting rid of them. If you go into the US or Canada and you speak to the people who are on the far right, and you say, we have a plan, Black people deserve a country on their own, let's send them back to Africa and support them to have a country. You don't do it because you want to support the self-determination of the Black people in Canada and the US, you just don't want the you don't want black people, and that's the solution to the problem. It also applies to the Muslims. If somebody comes and says Muslims shouldn't be living in this land, this is haram land, you know what? It's in the US and Canada, Muslims need to go to Saudi Arabia. This is where it needs. They need to go back to their Muslim countries. And we need to support them to have independent countries, democratic countries, or better regimes, and you support them. You don't support them because you are interested in the best interest of the Muslim community, but that's a way of getting rid of the Muslims that you do not like. The same thing applies for Mexicans, or the same getting rid of the Mexicans in the US from certain areas, and so on. So you have this way of thinking. So it's actually the people who were anti-Semitic who were very supportive of Israel, or supported the logic of Zionism. Another group of people who were normal Christians, and they felt very guilty after the Holocaust, and they said, you know, it's the Jews have suffered so much in history, which is true, in Europe and many parts of the world. But speaking in Europe, they have suffered a lot, and they have paid a very high price. We, as a majority, we're not safe to Jews. So Jews need to have a country of their own for their own safety. So it comes from the logic of the Holocaust guilt, or awareness that, you know, Europe has a disease of racism and anti-Semitism. The third group of Christian Zionists are simple Christians who read the Bible in a very simplified way. So there wasn't any kind of Christian Zionism, you know, theological Christian Zionism throughout history, but people just, you know, when they read the Bible, they read the Promised Land. They read that it's the chosen people. They read the stories of the Bible, and they're connected with the first temple, the second temple, and, you know, especially the Old Testament is a very historical book. Or I mean, it appears to be. It's not our approach as a historical book, but it appears to have lots of story, histories, and so on, and you relate it to the Jewish people, and you relate it to the land. So it's a simplified understanding, and you say, it's just the Muslims come from Mecca, the Christians, I don't know where they come from, Texas, most likely, or the Bible Belt, and the Jews come from Jerusalem. They have the right to go back to their land. You know, they're liberating their land. So in their concept, this is the right of return. We're supporting Jews to go back to their land, and this makes sense. So simple Christians who do not really understand how to read the Bible. Then you have a very dangerous group. It's a very dangerous group. It's the last two groups are the most dangerous. So one group is the crazy people, Christians who are a result of a theological movement that started again in the second half of the 19th century by some crazy folks who started to come and read the Bible and to see that there are hidden prophecies, which doesn't make any sense. It wasn't done by like a famous theologian or a church, or like a recognized church. It was just a group of random people. Now you can have conspiracy theories who promoted their work. Whether there's a conspiracy theory that there were people funding this, or it was really actually crazy people like conspiracy theories. They love this, you know, it's attractive, it's entertaining. So a group of people believe that Jesus is coming back, but to make it faster for Jesus to come back, there are certain steps that we need to do as human beings. Help the Jews go back to Jerusalem, build the third temple, you know, convert the Jews to Judaism, or so on, and you have Armageddon and so on. So it's a series of nonsense stories that have no foundations. Some of them are only inspired by like 3 words or a sentence, and then people have built on it in their imagination. So those people, I don't know if you've read, like in the news, they talk about, you know, the people who fund tens of millions of dollars trying to get the red calves from Texas to bring them so that they can have a ceremony at the temple, or, you know, they are the people who fund Aliyah, which is helping Jews to come from all around the world to go back to Israel. So they do it. So there's a lot of money. There's pretty crazy people who are funding it, mainly in the US, mainly in the Bible Belt, who are supporting it. And their conspiracy, they don't like the Jews, they don't like Israel. They want Jesus to come back, and they believe for Jesus to come back, the Jews need to gather, and the temple needs to be rebuilt, and 2/3 of the Jews need to be slaughtered, and 1/3 will become Christian and be raptured to heaven with God. So they're in no way friends of Israel. They're pretty dangerous, anti-Semitic, crazy, messed up. Then the last, and this is the most dominant Christian Zionism that exists today, which is the people who are not from a theological background, but these are the people who believe that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So for them, they're convinced that the enemy of the world is Islam. So there are people who are very Islamophobic. They hate Islam. And they believe that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and the only way it's who's the enemy of the Muslims? It's the Jews, and we need to support Israel and the Jews to fight the Muslims. So that is actually it's today it's very strong within the right wing ultra nationalist groups in many different parts of the world. So these are like the different categories. In my opinion, these are the main categories that when people who identify as Christian Zionists, or we could label them as Christian Zionists, belong to. And they're completely different groups. So Sabeel, we started, you need to let me know when to stop. So can we figure out like, when should I stop, or should we have questions now, or should I keep on going with other topics?
So there's no right or wrong answer here. Maybe I'm learning a lot from you. Maybe how about if you're up for it, maybe we go on for 5 more minutes and then turn it into a discussion.
Okay.
Does that sound okay to you?
Yeah. So I'll stick now with the topic. So I'll give 5 minutes to the topic, just so that you don't say that Omar went out of the script. So
thank you. I'm learning a lot. This is fascinating.
So you've asked me to speak about pilgrimage. So since Christianity started, and since Christianity started in Palestine and is an Eastern religion, and it spread to the different corners of the world, people wanted to come, and people have been coming and visiting the land for multiple reasons. Out of curiosity, they wanted to see the land where Jesus walked, where Jesus preached, where Jesus did the miracles. Others wanted to come on a spiritual journey, to do like Hajj, or like to do a renewal, to come into. Yes, I agree with you. It's exactly the same logic. People who come into, who wanted to come and just have a spiritual renewal. So for us in Palestine and Israel, the Holy Land, Sabeel has been present for, next year will be 40 years. 40 years since the beginning, since the founding of Sabeel. And we came as a response to educate churches, the different kinds of Christians, as I've mentioned, into the different categories when they come to Palestine. We do not have the ability to travel to the world, but luckily, because of our presence in Jerusalem, the world comes to us. And this has enabled us an opportunity to speak and to educate people. First, letting them know that there is, that we exist, and we want to share our story, that there is a group that is called Palestinian Christians. We are Palestinians, and we want to share our Palestinian story. And what happened to us in 1948, the Nakba, had a devastating effect on Palestinians. It had on Palestinians in general, but specifically on Palestinian Christians, where we used to be, and it continued to be, around 10-15% of the entire Palestinian population in the diaspora and locally. However, inside Palestine, historical Palestine, Israel, the Holy Land, regardless of how you use the terminology, we are today less than 1%. Less than 200,000 Christians live in the Holy Land. However, if you go around the world, there's over 1 million Palestinian Christians who live, and we're 1 out of 10 Palestinians, 10 million Palestinians. So we educate people. We educate the people that we exist. We educate people that we are also Palestinians, and there is a Palestinian narrative. We also tell people that it's your responsibility and your obligation to become involved in defending human rights. We encourage people to we, as a liberation movement, we want to liberate religion from the people who are misusing it to justify the insanity. As I said, you cannot come and start talking about what's happening in Palestine without really, if you want to justify it without really being brainwashed or justifying it by religion. So religion is a way that to dominate and to control people's minds. But religion is also beautiful because it's also a beautiful catalyst that makes people work in an amazing way for liberation and collective liberation. So we liberate religion, and we also help people to liberate themselves through faith and trust in God. So these are my 5 minutes. One of the ways of what we do is these educational tours. We want people to be educated. We want people to be involved. We want the people just to even to listen to us. Because when you're into research says when people go through a trauma, the people who survive are the people who have been able to share the trauma. They have a higher risk, a higher percentage success rate of surviving the trauma if they are able to share their story. The people who do not share their story, they have a lower percentage success rate uh, of sharing their story of survival and the resilience. So we want people to listen to us. We want people to walk with us. We want people to go back and become ambassadors for us. We want people to be involved. And we've been doing this work for over 40 years. We don't only work with Palestinian, with Christians around the world, although that's the major part of our audiences. And the churches play a very big role in the work of liberation for our people and for human rights. But also we want people to go and to challenge and to speak truth to power because they come from countries that are inflicting injustice to us, especially the United States.
All right. Thank you so much. That was very informative. And like we have learned and read a lot about Lord Balfour, for example. Um, but I didn't know that he was a Christian Zionist. And then also him being an anti-Semite. That was also new detail.
Yeah. You know,
Uh,
he was the biggest advocate against Jews coming into the UK who were fleeing the persecution in Europe, in Russia. So he would block and he'd say, like, they're not our problem. We don't want Jews in the UK. We have enough Jews. And this is like documented speeches that he have said.
right.
Uh, yeah, so it wasn't like he was really, finding the best interest of the Jewish people. And
Right.
actually, the first people in the UK who objected the Lord Balfour, the people who have challenged him, were the members of the Jewish members of the government. They were saying this is anti-Semitic. So it's not like it's a conclusion that Omar is sitting here, after 100 years saying that Lord Balfour was anti-Semitic. It was the Jewish members of government who accused Lord Balfour of being anti-Semitic.
So one question I had is, I talked to my Christian neighbors in Canada. I informed them about what's happening in Gaza, in West Bank, and I have encouraged them to, connect me with their pastors and other leaders. And a few months ago, we even had one of my neighborhood pastors speak to our group as well. And so he spoke about, the conflict from perspective of Christianity. Um, and one kind of tightrope that I have, this is a question that Karina and Tom have probably heard me ask before. Is like, you can't really tell another community how to behave, right? And so, how do I what, um, eh, just something simple, like if, if a Muslim is torturing another human being, like it's my duty as a Muslim to speak up against that, right? And be like, hey, this is not Islamic behavior. So, but if I tell a Christian that, okay, this is not Christian behavior, that kind of crosses a little bit of a line, right? But it's always good to kind of invite these discussions. And what?
I disagree.
Okay.
I think it's our responsibility. I mean, okay, I understand if we were living in the 17th century, 18th century, maybe in the 9th century, that's valid. But as long as we live in at the times where we live, where our countries, our nations, we have come and we've accepted that there's a universal human rights declaration. All countries, or the wide majority of countries, adhere to. So there is a reference. You don't go and there's an expectation of how people deal with people, how people how people behave. So that it is, you hold them accountable to agreements that, especially in Canada, or I mean, it is in countries that they have um, um, they've signed on. So it doesn't have to go to tell a Christian how to be like a Christian or a Muslim. We have to tell how people to behave as human beings,
Right.
and to be held accountable.
Right. The human rights, the fundamental human rights, those are unalienable, absolutely. And that's definitely something we can have a conversation around. And I'll tell you another story. At least that one pastor that I am in conversation with, his children play with my children at our park. And he ended up speaking with us a few months ago. But I've also invited some other pastors, and like, after kind of a couple months of back and forth, basically one of them responded to my neighbor whose pastor it is, and he said that, oh, I need to travel back and forth to US often, and I can't speak up on this topic, and because that would affect my travel to US back and forth.
Mm.
Um, and you know, I just told my neighbor, who was also my friend, like, okay, that's just really sad. And I didn't say anything beyond that, but I was thinking and feeling a lot of things. I was like, this, yeah, it's just really, really sad that, that's the world we live in. That, you know, yeah. So, and
I mean, I think that, I mean, it's two things that I would give you as an advice,
hmm,
because we do this all the time. We're always engaging. We're engaging. It's thousands of Christians that we involve with and we work with, and it's very frustrating because this is a very difficult conversation to have.
hmm,
And now we're having it, it's also difficult sometimes even to have it within the own Palestinian or the Arab community, or within the Muslim community. It's most of the solidarity that is taking place is actually coming from the northern world, the developed countries, more than our traditional allies
right,
who have come by the
absolutely,
Middle East.
yeah,
So one thing, but my advice is, like, now when you're speaking, and this is specifically to Christians, I think it really helps is to be not what you share with them, but it is actually what you listen. Be a good listener. So as I said, I divide them into different categories, figure out what is driving them to say what they're saying. I don't think it is the fear is the main reason that they're not speaking. I think it could be if you feel that they're not Islamophobic, then that's maybe it's not. Maybe if you don't feel that they're also anti-Semitic, then you feel that maybe they have just a naive interpretation. So sometimes just giving them like some of the material, a basic material. So for each group of people, there's a certain medicine, as we call it, or a cure, or something that would help to open their eyes and their hearts to the realities that we need to live in. The second part of it is that we usually we do one of the problems that we do with advocacy or with education, which is really we only apply it when we're very passionate about the topic, especially when it comes to Palestine. So I see like Tom is tech for Palestine. So I assume he's a
yeah,
programmer or somehow knows a little bit about computer. You should meet people where they are, not where you are. Not have people to meet you where you are. So part of it is you need to be able to do diagnosis where they are. So if it's like I've never programmed anything, so if you're gonna start with me on programming, you shouldn't um, you shouldn't feel that it's when you're engaging with people to on Palestine, just figure where they are and just help them to come to cross to our side of the line. Do not make it difficult for them to cross. You should make it easier. You should build bridges for people to cross over.
Yeah.
And many of us, we feel that, in advocacy, there's two schools of doing advocacy. One group is that you actually, it's principle-based advocacy. So you say, Palestine needs to be free. Israel sucks. Zionism is colonialism. Full stop. So you're just defending the position, the ethics. That's a way of doing it. This is really helpful. I think that's really great. But also, there's a more result-based advocacy, as you try to help people to move from where they are. You're not defending the castle, but actually you're building bridges and trying to get engaged with people. I do more. I have, I've developed an amazing skill. It makes me like a superhuman being. I've been able to connect a tube between my two ears. So a lot of the words that come in, they come from here and they fly from the other side. It really doesn't get me upset. I agree. I nod my hand and I say, yes, I agree, and so on. And and then I start from the beginning. If you do not have this tube and it gets into your mind and it gets into your heart, you become, paralyzed. You're not able to engage. You're not able to work together or so on. I saw you've encouraged others to get involved. No, that means that they get less time to speak.
I love the tube thing. I need to build my own tube too.
Yeah, Tom can write the coding.
Oh, I have some tube handy as well right now. So, all right, Karina, please.
Thanks. Sorry, quick question. Did you call that results-based advocacy? Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna look that up.
Don't look it up. I just made it up, or I made it up in the conversation, so it's fine. Okay. You're not gonna find anything about it.
Okay.
Trademarked Omar Haramy.
I'm still learning the back history of Palestine, 1948, and I'm just still not clear. Like, what happened to the Palestinian Jews? Like, what percentage of Palestine at the time of the Nakba was Palestinian Jews? And what happened to them? Are they still persecuted because they're Palestinian, or do they now identify as Israeli Jews? Like, I don't understand.
So the Middle East, yeah. So the Middle East has been has always been very diverse. So in pre-1948, there were 1 million Jews who lived in the Arab world. 1 million. That's a huge number. If you look at the official holiday in Baghdad today, Baghdad was Friday and Saturday because it was also with Shabbat. So just to have an understanding of this. The foreign minister of Baghdad was Jewish. The same thing when it was in Syria. The same thing in Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, Yemen, and so on. Now there's much smaller numbers of Jews who live in the Arab world. And in Palestine, there has been, of course, it's very complicated because it depends on who's counting. So when the British, when Zionists give out numbers before 1948, they've increased the numbers. The Ottomans, we believe, decreased the numbers. But anyways, there is between there was around 5% of the population was Jewish. So that is like a more reasonable percentage. So 5% of the population were Palestinian Jews who spoke Arabic, who were Palestinian, who identified as Palestinians. My grandmother grew up next to a Jewish family. And she would they would ask her to come and to turn on the lights on Shabbat, so that it is it's of the lights, because they're not allowed to do it. So it's like, this is like the context. It's not like we're foreign, there's many religions, many ethnicities, many groups. We're not saying that the Jews in the Middle East were living in a utopia, as some people claim, or all minorities, but there wasn't a targeted, discrimination. So the governments discriminated against everybody in the same way, almost in the same way. So there was fair distribution uh, of injustice. But also, even with the people who say that the situation was not utopian or perfect, have also said that the situation was not even as close as to how bad it was in Europe. So 5% of the population was Jewish, Palestinian Jewish. Then the community, then it became, this community were the first to actually to raise the attention of the Palestinian community, the local Palestinian community, about the dangers of Zionism. They were saying, be aware, as Palestinians, conversations are happening inside in some circles in Europe to come and to take over the land. And they were the first to bring it to our attention for two reasons. Part of it is because they saw Zionism as a colonial project. They say that it was blonde people coming to take over the land and to discriminate against brown people. But another part of it is that most of the Jews in Palestine were Orthodox Jews, like how it is in the Middle East, are not secular. And in Orthodox Judaism, or ultra-Orthodox Judaism, is that the state of Israel that the Jews have been sent into the diaspora as a punishment from God, and they will only come back when the Messiah comes back. So there's no way that it's when people started to bring in, to start the country, it means that they were intervening in God's plan, and this is a heresy. So that is the logic of it. But in 1929, in part of, there always was a Palestinian community. In 1929, there were riots close because of Al-Aqsa Mosque and issues in Jerusalem. And in one of the cities of Palestine, Hebron, where the tombs of the patriarchs happened, there was an uprising, and close to 30 Jews were killed by Palestinians. The Jews who were killed were Palestinian Jews. They were killed because it was part of, it's a mistake, it's a dark part of our history, but they were killed, they were Palestinian Jews, and this is when the last time that this community started to identify as Palestinian Jews, and they started the majority of them to come and say that our allies are the Jews who are coming from other parts of the world. As of today, almost 50% of the Jews in Israel, Jews are different kinds of groups depending on where they come from. The people who come from Europe, Western Europe, are called Ashkenazi Jews. The Jews who come from North Africa, they are called Sephardi Jews. And the Jews who come from the Arab world, although many of North Africa is Arab world, but they lived like mainly in the Arab world, are called Mizrahi Jews. And they have their story, and these were the 1 million Jews, close to 1 million Jews who lived with us. And they're mainly Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox, and they've had their own, there's a lot of material that is being written about it, and many of them still call themselves as Palestinian Jews. Not many. I think they are in the thousands. It's a growing movement. Part of it is also by liberal Jews, progressive Jews who are anti-Zionist, and they still want to be part of the land, and they're identifying as being Palestinian, and so on. It's not they're a small minority, but there's a group that is called. They mainly live in Jerusalem, and this group is mainly ultra Orthodox. And this Jewish community is like, if you go into their neighborhoods, they have Palestinian flags, they have, it's when the police comes, they throw stones at them. And what drives them to do what they do is strictly religion and not nationalism, but they identify more as Palestinians than Israeli Jews.
But they're not persecuted because they're Jews, or are they persecuted by the Israeli Jews because they're Palestinian Jews.
So it's you see this community many times on social media. It attracts the attention. It's the Orthodox Jews carrying, its flags, Palestinian flags, and so on. The Naturi Karta. This is the group. You can look them up. They're a bigger community in New York. But yes, they are not seen as in any way as popular. Even if you're a leftist inside Israel or you're a progressive Israeli, you're seen. It's being called as left is as if you are called as a traitor, as an evil person. So it's not easily. People are. It's a big insult to call people left. So imagine if you call people as a Palestinian Jew, you're a traitor. But there have been, there's the scandal of the Yemeni kids, Yemeni Jews. It's when hundreds of Yemeni kids, when people from Yemen came, Yemeni Jews, they came into Israel in the 50s and 60s. The government had a program to take the children of these kids and raise them with other with Ashkenazi, with white Jews, in a way to help to overcome the Yemeni culture. So it's a very big scandal. So they've taken the children of the parents and nobody knows, and they haven't been reunited with their biological parents. So that's one of the, there's so many chapters and stories that are to be told.
Omar, how can I introduce Sabeel to my Christian neighbors? What are some of the key activities that you do? Karina has told us a lot about it before, but maybe like focusing from the Christian pilgrimage perspective. I as a
I would
Muslim.
even say that it's easier if it's you. There's a document online. It's called Kairos Palestine. So this is a document by Palestinian Christians and churches. So it speaks about Palestinian Christians and our position, what is happening into the land. So you can just tell your neighbors, look, I've met this crazy group of Palestinian Christians and this is what they've written. And can you tell me if this is right or wrong? And actually, I know one of the authors or one of the people who are on the board of this. And that would be a good conversation to come and say with it. If they can, just throw this document as an argument, and then it's a very useful argument, which actually for the Church of England just recently they've adopted Kairos 2, and they've called Israel as an apartheid state, and they've called what is happening as a genocide. So it's been a huge thing happening in the UK. So the major church has adopted, an anti-Zionist apartheid. So that's a huge thing. We also have the Methodist Church in the UK. That's a huge church. We have the Presbyterians have also, they're divesting from Israeli companies. So it's not like like we're not having this conversation like how we did it like 40 years ago. We're winning. We're taking it over. Even people who are on the right, like Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens and so on, everybody's becoming, it's a growing movement. We're winning in the global north. Even JD Vance is very open. I mean, he has also said in meetings and in his last podcast with Joe Rogan, he has spoken, things are changing. We're losing the global south. Indian churches, Chinese churches, churches in Africa, they're mainly driven by Islamophobic or anti-Muslim sentiment. In Latin America, Zionism is growing. Indonesia, the churches there are growing. So, we're focusing on the richer churches and the more powerful churches because they are not because they're more important, but this is where they're, they have the energy in the US.
And like what can I specifically tell my Christian neighbors about Sabeel? I heard a lot of great things about it from Karina. I would love to hear from you as maybe our closing thoughts.
Ask them to have a meeting with them. Just have a meeting, invite your Christian friends, and just say that there's a group, and then we would be able to speak with them. you don't need to be articulate. Doesn't mean that I'm not articulate or Palestinian Christian, but it's when you're sharing the facts, you're sharing the stories, you're coming and you're helping people to understand that there is injustice that is taking place. And you have a CV, you have the information, and you have like credible people who would vouch for you and speak, of what is happening. It's easier. It's so easy to open the eyes and hearts of people. You just need to give people, build a bridge. Do not focus about how to do it. Connect the people.
I don't know what your question
Sadly,
is.
we live in a messed up world. Sorry.
I was just gonna say something anecdotally. I don't know if it answers your question, Salman, but like I'm not a religious person, but I felt that going to Palestine with Sabeel was a very valuable perspective into what's going on there. If you're going to the Holy Land, seeing it through their eyes, what's happening there, and to give a Christian community another perspective of what's going on if they're coming from a silent Christian community or an uninformed Christian community, Sabeel is the way to go. And I don't know if that answers your question, but I just found it really a great way to enter the conversation of what's going on in the ground by going with Sabeel.
If we start with the conversation, we can invite them to come, but it's because it's definitely like, it's like when we have a serious conversation with an idiot who's like, it's driving us crazy. The biggest thing is we say, come and see. That's our like, come and, come and see the realities on the ground. And it really works because the facts speak for themselves.
Deepak, please. Omar, before you continue, are you okay with going a couple minutes over? Maybe taking one more question from our friend Deepak?
Yes, of course. Yes.
Thank you so much. Deepak, please.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you are loud and clear.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, actually, Omar, for your nice presentation and insights. Actually, I joined a little late, so I missed the initial talks of few couple of minutes. And it is very interesting to know about the different types of Christians and the ideologies. Actually, what interested me, I was very curious to know about it. The far right extremist ideologies or the supporters and the type of Christians, one type of Christians that are very close to the extremist groups. So actually it helps sometimes to create more posts on social media. And I don't have any questions because I missed the initial parts. I just wanted to learn more about your insights. So if you can share some, the links so that I will go through videos or any text or your and other resources. So I would like to know more and more about this topic. So that is the only thing, not any question. Thank you. Because it will help in creating posts, giving solid evidences instead of just writing without any evidence or any source. Thank you.
Actually, a big chunk of this meeting was on that we spoke about Christian Zionism, which is a form when it comes to Palestine, Israel is a form of extremism. However, it is part of it is very important to be reminded, all of us as people, that it's not like there's a group that is progressive and liberal and there's a group of conservative or racist. And we need to understand that we are all, by nature, we are all racist or biased towards a position. So nobody is perfect and nobody should claim that they are not, that they are perfect. And we are all somehow, we harbor bad ideas and bad concepts. And this is part of it is what we have inherited from our communities, personal experiences, and so on. So in Christianity, there are four different, I would say, denominations or four different Christian families. One is the most famous is the Catholic Church. Everybody will see the Pope as the leader. Um, they are they are historically and currently not very Zionist group of people, and they look at mainly at the church history and at the church experience and the church hierarchy as a place of inspiration and leadership. And they do not see any connection with the state of Israel. Doesn't mean that there are many Catholics who are part of the problem, but it doesn't mean that they are that this is a general feeling within the churches. There are the Orthodox Church, and the Orthodox Church really doesn't care about looks only at the scripture as an indication towards Jesus and doesn't look at land or justification or political agenda. So they completely disconnect religion and they live in a very traditional, simplistic way. We have also the churches of the Middle East, which are the Oriental churches like the Syrian, Armenian, and so on. And these are also not historically, they have been actually more historically because of their experiences and so on, more leaning towards maybe a little bit of harboring or accused of harboring anti-Semitic theology than like a pro-Israel theology. The biggest problem comes with the evangelical churches who read the Bible and Protestant churches, that's the last family. And this is where most of the extremists come from, which is changing very fast because people who read the Bible as a legal book. And they say, oh, God said this is exactly how it is. So they read the book in a literal way and for each word. And when you read the book, any scripture or book in a very literal way as orders, you have very little space to maneuver. You become very much, because we have in the Bible, it says, St. Paul says that the word, it is the word can kill. If you focus on the word, words will kill you because there isn't much space for it. But the spirit, if you believe in the spirit of the soul, then this gives life. And many people, sadly, have, as evangelicals and Protestants, because of their traditions and their history, they've been accustomed to a certain way of doing theology, and this creates not enough space. When you read the Bible in a very literal or religious book, it makes it more difficult for you to find equality with women's rights, for example, or it is to focus on topics that could be related to economical justice or social justice within our society, because you say, this is what God said, this is what the prophets did, and this is what I will do. You have no space. But if you take that, if you take it into a spirit level and you have this space for maneuver, to maneuver and to work, then this opens more space for you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So thank you so much, Omar. Thank you for your time. That was a great learning experience. And I love your straightforwardness and the pragmatic approach. And sometimes the answers are simple and easy, and sometimes they're not, right? And so I will definitely be telling my Christian friends about Sabeel, and your website's very easy to remember, sabeel.org. Um, and um, uh, and we heard great things from Karina about Sabeel, and looking forward to staying in touch with you. Thank you everyone for attending, and thank you Omar for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Karina, for staying in touch and giving us and making connections.
Yes, always.
Thank you everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your day and evening. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Thank you, Salman. Thank you. Bye.